Okay, welcome to episode 4 of Tales from a Disappearing City. I'm here with my good friend Howard Slater, aka Flint Michigan. How you doing, Howard?
Doing fine, thanks, Neil. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think I
yeah,
first met you back in the mid 90s down at Dead by Dawn.
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
You on the door with your code word.
that's right. I once got punched as well. Yeah,
Oh, did you? Because of
but
the code word?
I don't know what it was. Yeah, but I remember some mad guy once punched me well and proper. Yeah,
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
used to like it out there on the door smoking. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we'll tell that story another time. But
yeah.
you've done a lot of writing about I don't know how would you describe your writing, Howard?
I suppose it's countercultural, access all areas of cultural underground culture, stuff that's off the radar.
Yeah.
So I started out writing poetry and stuff like that when I was
Yeah.
a kid.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
Can we get a poem today or?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
Yeah,
All right. So, um, I tell you, let's start off a bit like we did with Ian Black Mass, who
yeah,
did, the first few episodes. What were your early experiences like buying music and that sort of stuff?
yeah. Well, I reckon I was lucky. My dad was into music,
Yeah.
so I reckon one of the first albums I ever remember hearing as a tiny nipper was Rolling Stones
Okay.
and Cream and stuff like that. But I remember when I was about 8 or 9, my dad turned up with a big plastic bag full of 7-inch singles.
Yeah.
And these were all like rock and roll stuff: Elvis, The Shadows, Dwayne Eddy, uh, that drummer guy, Sandy Nelson. I
Oh,
think he was,
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he like did these solo drum stuff. So that was like the first vinyl of my own, in a sense, that they were for me, these records. But I'd also been collecting like James Bond soundtracks with John Barry.
Okay.
I was a big fan of all that soundtrack stuff. And he seemed to float about people's record collections like uncles and aunties, somehow easy listening,
Yeah.
John Barry vinyl and stuff like that. But I reckon when it really took off as I must have been about 11 or 12 when punk hit. As a first year at secondary school, it was a grammar school actually. And
So where was this?
yes,
Howard, this was in Preston, was it? Or
this is in Preston, a town outside Preston called Longridge.
okay.
And I remember you and Ian talking about, your local newsagent would stock vinyl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
The
think,
jukebox cutouts, I think they were.
yeah, I got the Dam's first album from a little sleepy shop in Longridge,
Oh wow.
and the Jam. So my first purchasing was of this stuff,
Yeah.
punk records. It sort of changed my life. I was quite maladjusted at this secondary school, this grammar school,
Okay.
and
I can
the Pistols,
identify with that. Yeah.
yeah, the Pistols came along, and it just seemed to fit totally naturally. It just was like instinctually attracted to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that started off the vinyl purchasing stuff. Singles were a great medium because they were cheap, and it was part of the teenage market from rock and roll. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
kids and apprentices could buy vinyl. That's a 90p a pop, so it was an accessible medium that
Yeah.
you
And
could,
like we said,
yeah,
I think them newsagent ones were like 30p or something like that because they were
yeah,
all the cheaper ones. A lot of them didn't have a proper cover, I remember, because I think they'd been in the jukebox. They had the middle sort of stamped out
yeah,
for the jukebox. So you needed that little plastic bit that you put in the middle of
yeah,
this
yeah. I've still
seven
got
inch.
one. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I still
the,
got loads of them floating
them
about.
them import records, 7-inch factory Benelux. They came with no middle.
Oh,
I seem to
okay.
remember, yeah, ACR's first Shack Up and all that. That came with
I think
like
some of the reggae records were like that as well, maybe,
yeah,
or maybe
yeah,
some of the soul ones. I think, yeah,
because the turntables, they used to have like a little plastic noddle that
yeah,
you put on the turntable and
right,
slot the record on top of it. I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
God,
So
these young people don't know what they're missing. Yeah, with their
no, they
Spotify and
don't.
their no, exactly. Yeah,
Smaller record players. Yeah. You could carry a record player around like a little box, like them dance sets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a bit
Yeah,
like bit like a mobile phone, but bigger.
mm,
Right, but yeah, you had to put these
but
big
better.
plastic. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I may disagree a little bit there, but that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, no mind. Yeah. So I guess that were it. And then you start to form little bands,
Mm.
through the punk thing, three chords, like you were saying in episode 3 with Ian, you do it yourself.
Yeah.
So by sort of mid-teens, you're rehearsing in your garage, you get an electric guitar because it was like beat groups in them days, since weren't on the cards. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I formed bands by like 15, 16, doing little gigs in youth clubs. I've got a poster of one somewhere.
Oh, amazing.
Bargecom was our band's name.
Okay. All right. If
Yeah,
you find that, send me a scan and I'll put it up on
yeah.
screen.
I found the poster. Yeah, I found the
Yeah.
poster, and we ended up in a recording studio in Manchester. You
Wow.
get your guitar. You get your guitar. This guy used to say, yeah,
Yeah.
the producer. So, and so that was all prior to moving to London, really, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I didn't do too well at school. My mates went to uni. I had a year sort of in Preston. The band disbanded because they all went to uni. And then the prospect of, in them days to get work in Preston was like, I go to interviews and there'd be like 50 fucking people there,
Yeah.
in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And it was like, you never get a fucking job. So my mates after a year said, why don't you come down? We've got a squat.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I wanted a job with Tony Wilson at Factory, and I sent him a letter, and that he didn't reply. So I thought, right, I'll go to London then.
Oh my God. What, his loss, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there we are. I was a factory head, like total nutter. I remember
What turned you on to them then, Howard? What was the first stuff you heard from that sort of side of the music?
You're looking at that break from straight rock. I always saw Factory as a break from straight rock. Hannett's
Yeah.
productions were pristine, beautiful, and like, I don't know, it'd probably be around Joy Division.
Yeah.
And we also had access to the NME in them days. And the NME was like a central hub of what was coming out. So you'd be in that indie first wave of independent labels, fast product, factory, industrial, these sorts of, and they were bringing a fresh flavor into music. They were opening your ears up a bit. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. I mean, I think Faster are sort of underrated actually, because like
Fast product, yeah. That was a very key label. We had access to it at school. We had a guy used to put out a fanzine. He was like a sixth former.
Okay.
He did a zine called "Here Come the Martians." And
okay. Do you have any copies of this, or like?
No, my friend's sister's got one.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so he'd sell us this zine, 20 pence. He'd have interviews with a certain ratio and the fall in it, and stuff like this. So, and he was Fast Product had a kind of youth culture mutant pop vibe going on. They put those sorts of words in on the runoffs, mutant pop, difficult fun. And they made what was called ear comics, Earcom 1, 2, and 3. So you had like a.
I knew it was Earcom, but I didn't know that's what it stood for.
Yeah, I think it's ear comic. And they'd come, and so Andy Hobbs, he was called. He did this zine, and he'd give us badges, fast product badges, and all this sort of stuff. And Preston's only band to get a John Peel session, the Blank Students, were on Earcom 1. They were actually on this vinyl with a band called The Flowers and a Sheffield outfit called Graph, something like that. And on that Graph one, I think we had a synth. And so don't want to touch too much on that because I know we want a separate chat on all that synth drum machine thing.
Yeah,
but,
no, I think that's a rich form for another day. But we'll dive into that maybe another time.
Yeah, so we had access to this fast product stuff, and I remember I'd had the badges. Gangafor and Mekons were also a big band at that time, and I had the badges, and I went round to my cousins out, my aunties, and my older cousin was at Leeds University, and she said, "Howard, what are you wearing that badge for?" I said, "What? It's just Gang of Four and Mekons." They said, "No, they trashed the Students' Union last Friday." So I
Who,
was
the
like,
Gang
"Oh,
of Four or the
yeah,
Mekons?
yeah, well, just the Mekons probably." But
Right.
it was like, well, I didn't do it. You know what I mean? As a
Yeah.
little innocent kid. But so yeah, that sound, a certain ratio were very big for me. They had this sort of dirgy funk thing. So you've been brought up on rock like the Pistols and the Clash, and then you were hearing, bands like ACR,
Yeah.
like gothic funk, loads of effects. Anyway,
But
yeah, we're veering off
yeah,
a
well, some
bit.
of the early punk was pretty trad rock, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah, very
I love
trad.
the Sex Pistols, but they're very sort of just hyped up
Yeah,
rock and roll, and so are the
yeah,
Clash.
yeah. I mean, I remember swapping Sandinistas triple album at the local, because we had a local indie store, Action Records, that's still going. I swapped Sandinistas for a mini pops. They were a Dutch drum machine orientated out single. And
Yeah,
I
I think
thought,
that's a good deal. Yeah,
yeah,
I'd have done that
I
deal.
always,
Yeah,
yeah, I always say that was a great deal.
yeah,
But yeah, so that's showing a little flavour of post-punk, opening your ears up, basically.
yeah. Also,
Reggae.
maybe what about the actual design of the stuff for like, because
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
they look
well,
cool. The Earcom stuff and obviously the factory stuff had a certain
yeah.
sort of different look to it.
Well, I think this was it. I've often said that first wave of indie was my university, not just mine, lots of other people's,
Yeah.
because you were being introduced to stuff via the covers, via the design, via the sound, via the production, that just opened up a whole new world,
No, no, it's
of
true. Like authors and stuff like that.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I probably got into
because
stuff like William Burroughs for like industrial music and all that sort of stuff.
absolute, utterly, absolutely, because we'd hinge on what Ian Curtis would say. You
Mm,
know, Ian Curtis was reading J.G. Ballard, Kafka, and all that sort of stuff. So like saying, it opened up the world of writing to
mm.
him.
Yeah,
Burroughs, big influence. You know what I mean?
yeah,
On lots of stuff. So yeah, I was dabbling in that writing as well at that time.
yeah. Is this when you were doing poetry, or is that like bit
Yeah,
like
yeah. I got mainly attracted to sort of surrealism and cut up stuff and word collages.
Tristan Zara, or that sort of?
Yeah, exactly. So I was exploring like Dada and surrealism
Yeah.
and that sort of stuff.
No, I loved all
But,
that stuff. Reading about the
yeah,
Dada stuff, that was a big
yeah,
influence on me when I was a teenager.
yeah.
Yeah,
It had a wave in that period because, of course, Cabaret Voltaire were called Cabaret Voltaire because that's where the Zurich Dada Club was, and all this
yeah.
sort of
Hugo
stuff.
Ball and all that. Yeah,
Exactly. So this stuff opened up a whole world of, let's call it avant-garde or counterculture,
mm.
not
Yeah.
the mainstream,
But with an edge as well.
with an edge, a political edge many times, a critical, satirical edge.
Yeah,
And that was in the music as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
you know.
What was that Dada performance? I think they did it in the toilet, and it was someone like reading poetry like against like religion, and
Yeah, they did a lot of that sort of
it
stuff.
was it was pretty hardcore. It wasn't just like
Yeah.
artsy
But
fartsy, ineffectual. It was literally
no,
in your face, and obviously 1916 or 1917
yeah.
or all
I
that
mean,
sort of time. Yeah,
there's a famous picture of Benjamin Perez spitting on a priest in Paris. So they were, yeah, like you say, they were out there.
yeah,
They took no prisoners, and so that you trace that punk spirit back, don't you,
yeah,
into like oppositional culture that has its roots in music scenes and everything, back to jazz and everything like that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, all right. So you're in Preston, and then like
yeah,
you're going. All right. I'm not going to get a job in wherever you would have got a job in Preston. You sort of
yeah,
heading down to London. So yeah, tell us a bit
yeah.
about that. What sort of time was that? What sort of year was that?
I think I moved 1984, summer of 84, into a squat in Brecknock Road.
All right.
So we
Where,
ended up
which one is that, Howard? Where's that? Brecknock Road.
Brecknock Road in Tufnell Park,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
leading into Camden Road.
Yeah.
and I ended up getting a job there. And yeah, the squat thing that was very easy back in the 80s. You know, you could break in,
Yeah.
take the wood off, because what they do in the days, the council would decant their own tenants and leave the place basically open.
Mm.
You know? So by the time I got there, they broke the squat, they got the electric on, because the electric weren't bothered who was paying, you know what I mean? So
Well, this is a thing that obviously, yeah, again, like it's two old men talking, but like again, if you're younger and you don't, you sort of know London now. It's sort of at that time there was loads of abandoned buildings, and
yeah,
there was still that thing of there was still like bomb sites from the war. There was
yeah,
still parts of London that was just hadn't been built on. You know,
yeah.
the Docklands was still,
Oh yeah, I mean,
empty
yeah,
and derelict, and so there was bits where, like, yeah, like you said, like the electricity didn't really give a shit. The council were
yeah,
just running down some of the properties, and
yeah.
like, if you broke in there, I mean, they
Well,
weren't really kicking you out, were they? Or
no, they weren't. No, because it wasn't. The Tories made it a criminal offence to squat
yeah,
many years later, but at the time it was a civil offence.
yeah,
So they'd find you were in there and serve your papers, so you could have a maximum of 6 months. I've known people who've ended up owning the bloody squat because the council neglected it for over 10 years. There was squatters' rights. And
yeah.
so,
Wasn't it 12 years or something? I think there's
something like that. Something
something
like
like if
that.
you squatted a place for 12 years, I don't know. Yeah, you were meant to be able to take ownership of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And of course, there were lots of squatted venues.
Mm.
You know, it wasn't just living spaces. People would break places and run squats as cultural centres.
Mm.
There was one in Bullens Road in South London near the Elephant. I used to go to quite a bit when I
Oh,
was in.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. It's in bands there. Forgot the exact name of it, but yeah.
Okay.
You'd on your trials about watching bands, you'd end up in a squatted venue,
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was what the move to London was, involving that squat. And then musically, it was a after Preston and even Manchester, you and Ian have talked about the record and tape exchanges.
Yeah.
They were just round the corner in Camden.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That was a
Incredible,
good one. Yeah.
yeah, you could educate yourself with music history,
Yeah. No, sure.
on the cheap, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and again, the band reformed and we used to rehearse at UCL. One of my mates was in UCL Ents committee, so I was on the fringe of that as his mate. Like,
Do you want to just explain what that means? The Ents committee.
Entertainment committee. They'd be putting on groups,
Yeah.
putting on bands,
Yeah.
and events for students.
Mm.
Sort of in like UCL, it'd be put on in the Bloomsbury Theatre. So then they put on bands like Drutty Column, Quando Quang. We used to get a lot of the factory acts there.
Yeah.
Wire, I think, I can't remember, but yeah. So then we started doing a trio with a drum machine. I played bass, and we were friendly. Well, we shared equipment with a band called Heads on Sticks.
Mm.
And a bit uncompromising, especially when we got Tottenham Riots type of thing.
Oh yeah, what Broadwater Farm was it?
Oh,
Or
what farm? Yeah, I remember wanting to go up there. Yeah, I remember the night that took
yeah,
place.
yeah,
And yeah, so they ended up putting on a gig at Jackson's Lane Community Centre with Section 25 and the Royal Family and the Poor. And the Royal Family and the Poor then were like just Mike Keane. And funnily enough, Bourbonese Quark, they did a lot of collaboration with Mike Keane of the Royal Family and the Poor, Hyman Crab.
yeah, sure.
He comes up, crops up later in the 90s. But yeah, so we put on this gig and it was, just great. You were, but musically, like I've said, you were post-punk had sort of moved on into what jingly jangly indie in a way. So
Yeah, I sort of remember that time, and yeah, I wasn't so into that sort of.
yeah, we had mates who put on clubs
Yeah,
and labels doing that, but it was more personally pursuing this parallel line out of factory and Hannah into like what were called industrial. I guess industrial just meant electronic music at the time, mainly electronically based.
Yeah.
Synths and drum machines, the Throbbing Gristle, Soviet France was a perennial thing throughout the years. Plus, I think an underrated outfit from that period, Nigel Ear's Nocturnal Emissions.
No, certainly. Like, no. I mean, yeah, I'd like to speak to Nigel sometime. Yeah, definitely some of them early 80s ones were, I mean,
they were
yeah,
harsh.
incredible, yeah.
Yeah, like sounds of barking dogs and clanking stuff and CIA tapes. This was, one of the.
Yeah, he was based in Camberwell then, I think,
I think he was. He's now
and
based.
also, yeah, and also down Brixton as well. Yeah,
Yeah, the Sterile Records. I think they had an address down there, didn't
yeah,
they?
they did. Yeah,
Yeah, very. And he kept going all these times. He's still got a YouTube presence, I think,
no,
reminiscing.
no. I love. Yeah, he's on Instagram as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely check Nigel out. He does these monologues from his shed in the garden, which are
yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
so yeah.
But great stuff, great underrated. Because at that time, another South London link, my mate was working in Recommended Records. Chris Cutler's place. Chris Cutler was, a prime political art rocker with Henry Cow and stuff like that. So they had all this recommended quarterly. So my mate were working there, so he got access to this left field stuff. They didn't stop the jingly jangly. We go down there for the Residents records.
Where was this based, Howard? Like, I know the name, but
Wandsworth Road, Wandsworth Road. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a little bit the wrong side of London for me. I don't really know that area so well, but yeah, I know the name. Okay, is that where it was? Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen live gigs in there as well. So that's touching as well to say we've got this sort of parallelish thing with the industrial and the electro, but also I got into jazz, like improv jazz.
This is mid-80s. We're still in that era, like 85, 80s. Yeah.
I mean, I did have a spell in Her Majesty's prison at one point.
Right.
But after that, it was, I think, being more propelled. Again, like you and Ian have said, there's all these key mates and figures who are enthusiasts, who you're sharing music with, who are turning you on to stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I just became interested in like the free improv scene in London.
Yeah.
And I'd played the bass with like a toolkit and a violin bow and a chorus pedal, So the idea was like we said before, it's this pursuit of sound as sound.
Yeah.
Pursuit that isn't harmonic.
How do you play a toolkit? Like, yeah.
Just used to put nuts and bolts under strings.
Yeah.
Over the pickup mic and sort of raise the strings to bow on it, scrape it.
Yeah.
Stuff. I've used to put ruler in between the strings and go, and it'd go bop, 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 like this. Now,
amazing. You do some DIY at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that's right. You can fix your toilet and make some tracks. But a key figure for that, who I took inspiration was from a band at one time I thought were the outer limits of music. They were a band called AMM.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the guitarist there was Keith Raw, and he was the master of this. Prepared Guitar is after John Cage,
Yeah, I've got one of their albums actually, and I was one of them. I knew their name. I didn't really know what to expect when I bought the album, and it is quite out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a hovering sheen. It's not quite ambient.
Yeah.
It's not quite jazz. It's some parallel universe. I was absolutely smitten by this stuff. Yeah. Very big fan of it. And it felt like, what are we listening to here? There's one called The Crypt that's just like noise, one of the mainstays there was Cornelius Cardew and stuff like this. It links back to the Scratch Orchestra, which is another thing like do-it-yourself music. Now, a good friend of mine, Stefan Zazulkin, you probably might remember him. He was in the Scratch Orchestra.
Do you want to say anything about the Scratch Orchestra, who they were? Or?
Well, it was a ragtag bunch of sort of troubadours, I guess you'd call it, who couldn't really play any instruments and just went around like making noise, making music live out there in the street, like it's a bit like guerrilla theatre, were like guerrilla music, you know,
Yeah,
playing.
just getting up and doing it
Yeah,
without any I don't know practice or intent.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
no. There were some skilled musicians like
yeah,
Cardi, but
yeah,
the idea was you just make music, like turn into the kitchen and start playing the kettle and the pots and pans, and
yeah.
yeah. So I was sort of getting into that,
Mm.
this kind of stuff. And still, there's still the electronic thing going on, because you started dabbling then via recommended into like the avant-garde electronic stuff, like the classical musicians who were turning to the studio to make electronic sounds. So that, of course, the most well-known is Stockhausen.
Yeah,
There was an element of exploring this as well. The search for electronics went out to Stockhausen, Cage, David Tudor,
Ligeti or not or
yeah, Ligeti, some of his early. It was these albums on Virgo that we're
right.
talking about. They put out Ligeti, Zimmerman.
Todd Dockstarter.
Well, I come across him later,
Yeah, yeah,
but wow, yeah, Dockstarter. Well, Dockstarter is just incredible.
yeah. I think Nomex put our good friend, sadly departed Paul Nomex put me onto Todd Dockstarter. Yeah,
Yeah,
back in the day. Yeah, that was
yeah,
1960 or something. I think that his
yeah.
Richmond album. Yeah,
He used to make cartoons, didn't he, Mr. Magoo?
yeah,
Dockstarter, and
yeah.
you'd stay back on the cutting desk making these, at them days, you used tapes to make this stuff,
Mm,
splice and cut tape.
mm,
So yeah, I mean, I remember also Joe Meek was another one.
yeah.
Like, if we're going to that Nomex, I remember maybe it was me, you, and Nomex went up to Holloway Road,
Okay.
where Joe Meek's studio was.
Yeah, above the
He
shoe
passed
shop
away.
or wherever it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. He
Yeah,
passed away many years before, but
yeah.
yeah, it's just this endless exploration.
No, for
Find,
sure. Yeah, I mean, I
finding the
Hear a New
sound.
World by Joe Meek is one of
Yeah,
the maddest albums you've ever heard. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you
No,
know,
no, that's just incredible. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, weird sped up alien noises. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Pinky and Perky at the worst, but
yeah.
people
All
won't know
right. So
about
yeah,
it.
back into the sort of scene in the mid 80s, the weird jazz experimental sort of scene. Yeah. So what, you're going to all these sort of gigs, Howard, and
Yeah, going to these gigs. I'm
playing your
rent,
toolkit.
playing my toolkit. We put on gigs at the Tom Allen Centre in Stratford, which is long gone, like disappearing in London.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I found an image of it for you there, actually.
Oh, nice.
Tom Allen Centre. Uh, I'm just looking down at these notes. Yeah, I remember a big turning point we've talked about before is Mark Stewart and the Mafia
Mm,
in the mid-80s.
yeah.
I'd seen them at the Electric Ballroom with Adrian Sherwood. What a night that was!
Mm.
Probably one of the most memorable gigs I went to in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I
Oh,
think because I think we talked before the show. Like, I saw him not there. I saw quite a few Sherwood gigs when he was at is it the Forum now? I always forget what I always call it Town and
Kentish
Country
Town.
Club, but like I think it's the
Yeah,
Forum. Yeah, Kentish Town. But I saw Mark Stewart and the Mafia at Harlesden Mean Fiddler, and that has got to be 84, 85, something like
yeah,
that. And that was one of the most brutal gigs I ever saw. And I literally come out deaf because it was so loud. It
yeah,
was just drum machines and samples and like political cut up speeches. And
yeah,
it really was assault on the senses. And
yeah,
it literally was. If you like, I used to like check out some of that electronic stuff and I'd always be kind of disappointed. It wasn't
yeah,
hard enough, weird
yeah,
enough. It didn't have, and this just had all the things of like electro, the hammering sort of beats. But
yeah.
yeah,
It was a great melding. It was a true post-punk like melding of these
yeah.
different.
And again, he's one of them. I don't know. He's quite an amazing figure, Mark Stewart.
Yeah.
Again, I think he's like one of them figures still going, and yeah, is
Well,
probably underrated. He was there in the punk scene from Bristol and involved
yeah,
in
pop
loads of
group.
sort of yeah,
Yeah.
pop group, and yeah, still going strong, and yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, going back to the pop group, that was
Mm.
again when I was still in Preston. They were a big band. They influenced that band from Preston, Blank Students.
Okay, yeah.
And going back to the zine, there was a story. A good mate of mine's older brother and this Andy Hobbs, who did the zine, travelled all the way down to Bristol,
Mm.
to meet Mark Stewart. They
Oh,
hadn't arranged anything. They
yeah,
just knocked on his door, and his mum answered and said, "Oh," he said, "He's Mark in." He
yeah,
said, "Oh, he's out." So they just said, oh, "All right," and went back to Preston. It was, so they didn't get
yeah.
the pop group. They didn't get the pop group interview, but they were.
God, history could have changed if you hadn't popped.
Yeah, history could have changed. History could have changed, but we had the vinyl, so we knew what they were about. And then Veneer of Democracy's got William Burroughs samples on, Pay It All
Yeah,
Back,
yeah,
from Nova Express and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, that was it. And Psychic TV was another gig in the 80s. I remember being in the queue behind Kathy Acker, the punk novelist, and all that combat stuff, the TG crew and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
And
Where
that
was that? Where was that gig, Howard?
can't remember. It was supported by my old favourites, ACR. Yeah, by that
Right.
time, ACR had really become more of a jazz funk outfit,
Yeah,
and they looked like innocents abroad compared to Psychic TV with all the video and oral assault. I remember that gig sounding like Sister Ray for an hour by
yeah,
Psychic TV. It was like a noise onslaught.
yeah.
Um,
I saw at that time. I saw Psychic TV loads of times. That was one of my first introduction to all that weirdo sort of
yeah,
industrial stuff. But
yeah,
just loads of weird tiny gigs in Hackney and like little community
yeah,
centres or in front of about 50 people. Some of them
yeah.
gigs were like, yeah,
Well, my weird little gigs was like ending up in the improv scene in sheds in Finsbury Park watching sound poets with 4 people. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
There's because a mate of mine who I did a lot of, who ran the improv workshop, Richard Scott, he was in, he turned into a drum and bass producer, I believe. But back in the day, he was running the London Musicians Collective as
okay,
well. So I had later links with Resonance magazine when I was writing in the 90s. That came out of the London Musicians Collective. But yeah, I remember like he'd have a Moog, and we'd go around his house. When I had a bass, I'd play the toolkit and he'd just be randomizing on the Moog. I've got cassettes of this stuff. It's just like
come on, you got to dig some of them out. Yeah,
it's like we once did a gig at Transmission Gallery in Glasgow and at the Tom Allen Centre. And it was a bit like, I didn't know who was making what noise.
yeah,
You touch something and have I affected the sound? Yeah, and I love that.
yeah.
I like the sense of like, well,
Did
I
you
don't
have
know
an
what
audience? Were they getting into it, or was it just
well, a few gigs, yeah, a few, because there was other things like Evan Parker was on at Tom
yeah,
Allen Centre, and the gig in Glasgow was as part of an art show, so there were people there, yeah, but on the whole, no, like you're looking at a minority sport. I guess, yeah, at a certain point, like in the improv scene, it sort of became ever decreasing circles. And then you almost begin to see the techniques that people are using. So it becomes like a formal thing. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You've listened to so much that you can almost predict what's supposed to be unpredictable.
yeah, yeah? It ends
It,
up becoming a cliche.
yeah, in a kind of a way. And so I'm just trying to think back to like at that point, what was my first encounter with sort of techno? Because I think it was at a certain, it might have been a rave at the PSV club, ending up in Manchester, and going to this thing thinking, Christ, I'm hearing this sound on sound thing, this
Hmm.
sound of sound here in this rave situation.
What do you know what year that was, Howard? Or
Late 890, I can't remember.
yeah, no, that's okay. But
Yeah.
around about that time, anyway.
Yeah, and I was living in Hackney at the time, and I remember walking through estates, and you could hear like different pirate stations
Hmm.
blaring out of windows. It was
Yeah,
like every flat had its own pirate station, and I was like, "What's this? What like it was like this is interesting," and it's like, "Whoa!" And then somehow I'd stumbled up, like you and Ian mentioned, Colin Dale and Colin Favor on Kiss.
hmm.
And I think I'd been taping pirate stations, not knowing what the hell this music was. Uh, and taping Colin Dale and Colin Favor
I mean, that
on
was the thing, though,
cassettes.
wasn't it, with the radio? Like that was the importance of the pirate radio. It was like you'd be going through the dial, like you said, or you'd hear it
Yeah,
blasting out someone's car or someone's window, and it's sort of confronting you with this new sort of music that
yeah,
you might not have heard in any other sort of way.
yeah. No, no. There's all that infrastructure of pirate stations and what people were doing. I mean, there was Chilling FM.
Yeah.
A bit later, I encountered, and you've been involved in the pirates and stuff like that. It's just incredible.
Yeah, Stacey
The
was on
energy.
Fantasy that time. Yeah,
Yeah,
1990. Yeah.
it was just that energy in the music, and of course, because of the post punk thing, the melting pot seemed to be arising again. If you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like this genreless stuff. Because at the time, I guess it was called hardcore, or rave scene or whatever, like late 80s, early 90s, and it was coming from all over the world, and you didn't know where it was coming from. It could have been from round the corner, or it could have been, as we eventually found out, Detroit.
Mm.
And I remember you and Ian also talking about compilations. And at that time, I didn't have a deck, so I was relying on cassettes. So I'll be buying like Bleep cassettes, and there was and CDs I think I had. And I remember there's a Detroit compilation, techno, 2 CDs that with Carl Craig on it and stuff like this. And another crucial one for me was Biorhythms, the network compilations.
Yeah, I remember that. Was it green cover or something like that?
Yeah,
Or...
green cut. I think that might have been a very early purchase in terms of techno. I loved Derek May and Carl Craig, Psych.
Yeah,
Uh,
some of them compilations were crucial in getting you to hear all these
yeah,
tunes. I mean, for me, I think it was all
yeah,
the Jack Tracks ones,
yeah. I remember
which I
them.
got in
Yeah,
88, 89. They had all the early Chicago stuff. And one of the volumes, because I think they went up to about 6 volumes,
yeah,
one of them was literally all Detroit stuff. So
yeah.
that was all like Mayday and stuff like that.
I going back, I remember the electro compilations. It was my sister who brought them into the house.
Yeah.
Electro 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Joanne Atkins is on that one, isn't he? Cybertronics. So it's
Techno City.
yeah, Techno City, which
Yeah.
was actually sampled by members of Cabaret Voltaire as well. But at that time, I was a lone wolf in a sense. It was like a private interest in relation to the friendship group. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Do you want to explain that, Howard? Because like,
Yeah. Well, I think I don't. I, it almost stemmed back to this. I want to say a kind of purism about music, a kind of purism that the guitar, bass, drums combo in whatever form, be it free jazz or post punk or rock, was sacrosanct.
yeah.
That somehow you've got this kind of snobbery against an artificiality, if you will. You've got this thing where the jingly jangly bands and all that rise of Oasis at that sort of period, it's like it's a retrograde step for me. It was like backwards,
Yeah.
And so it will go back to sort of like Blue Monday, even. I know we can touch on this at another time, early electronic techno precursors, whatever. But I remember my mates bought it me. We used to pile around someone's house, and they won't for my birthday, and they won't give it me till the end because they didn't want me to play it.
Oh.
So yeah, it's difficult. It was kind of like, I mean, my friends in the improv scene would go as far as to sort of suggest that techno was like fascist marching music,
Right.
four to the floor,
Yeah.
Uh,
I know. I do remember all it. I had friends like that when I was listening to acid house and like early rave music.
yeah,
This is when I lived in West London. I'd have my decks upstairs, and they'd all take the piss out of me for listening to like disco music and
yeah,
blah blah blah, and playing my tunes. And they were into just more like traditional sort of indie bands. And you'd get all that. Oh yeah, it's not proper music and all this,
yeah,
or blah blah blah. And I think I told you, like, I saw them all a few years later, and they'd all just been to like some party and going for it. And
yeah,
and I hadn't seen him for like 10, 15 years. And I was like, what are you talking about? You used to just like give me so much shit for like going to all
yeah,
these, playing this music, going to the parties, and they sort of looking at me like really kind of gutted, just going,
Yeah.
yeah, we know, and like they missed out on all these early raves and stuff like that because they were just dismissing it at the time as,
Yeah.
this sort of ephemeral sort of,
Yeah.
no
Automatic music.
cultural significance.
Yeah, no, it's quite shocking when you think of what happened, what came later.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at and your last with Ian, you showed the Lewisham Library
Mm.
thing, and they're coming out of the four aces. What you've got here, what I always used to associate this hot rave with was a working class culture, as
Yeah.
much as out else. You know what I mean? Through the streets of Hackney, it was, again, maybe that early snobbery is also like an anti-working class snobbery.
Yeah.
There's real music, and then there's puppet music that the working class listen to. Yeah, you kind of know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah,
There's like
well,
this serious stuff, and it relates a bit to what you were saying earlier on about those early classical dabblings into electronic. They're interesting, but they're kind of a bit overstructured in a sense. There's a certain
I don't
something
know.
missing.
Yeah, Leggetti doesn't sound good at a warehouse in 4 in the morning,
No,
unless
no,
you really are on good psychedelics.
yeah, he's not.
Um,
Yeah,
there's not much bass in there. Yeah.
no, yeah,
But yeah, exactly. They're interesting experiments. I mean, look, in one way, like with some of the all industrial stuff in the 80s, like always like the electronic sort of dancey stuff, it was all right. Like even like your Front 242s and
yeah,
Skinny Puppy. Like I know people going about Skinny Puppy, and like, yeah, they're all right to me. But for me, when I heard like early acid house, then I was suddenly like, okay, this is what it's about. It's got like the funk and the groove,
yeah,
still fucked up and weird, like trippy bass lines and sounds
yeah,
good on the sound system. It's yeah,
yeah,
it's got the funk, the fucked up funk.
yeah, absolutely, and that would relate to me to the early ACR thing, where
Mm.
the funk fucked up. There's some
Yeah,
weird sounds in it,
yeah,
over affected guitars back in the day with ACR. But then this same thing was raising its head in Detroit, from Detroit stuff.
yeah.
Like I remember the I remember hunting down. I was on the trail for a record in Soho, and it was Kirk DiGiorgio's Art, and it was Psych BFC.
Right.
And I was hunting this down, and I think I had to go to Record and Tape Exchange, where he sold it me. Someone sold it me from behind the counter in a second-hand shop,
Mm.
and it was this artificial. But that was incredible to me. Neurotic Behavior by Carl Craig. It sounded like fucked up craft work,
Yeah,
and
that's an amazing tune. Yeah.
yeah, and that set a sort of template for this dirty sounding thing.
Mm.
Like we can touch on Bunker and stuff like that at another point, but
Yeah.
you mentioned that label. But I remember searching that one down, and it was like the Holy Grail for me. That was like, wow. And another early one, I suppose, was everybody's Energy Flash.
Mm.
Joey Beltram's EP with this Psycho Bass Experience track on it.
Yeah.
Being fond of bass all the time, it was like, wow, I think he's using a bass guitar on this. And there was a Suburban Night track, The Worlds, that had this bass line riff on it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, well, that's that EP. It's got one side it says the worlds, and the other is art of
Yeah,
sculpting. Yeah.
yeah.
And like to
And
be
then,
honest, I still never, because I love both sides, and they're
yeah,
like similar. I can never work out which one's which, and I've got a feeling
no,
they might even have labeled them wrong to make it even more
yeah.
confusing.
Well,
Some people say one of them's the art of stalking, so I'm never quite sure. But both of them tunes are amazing, and I actually do remember the first time I heard of that was I saw an interview with Joey Beltram, and they asked him for his favorite record, and he said "The Art of Stalking" by Suburban Night. Yeah,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it was called The World, the one with the bass, the less sort of housey one, if we can make that distinction.
yeah.
But on the biorhythms as The Worlds that
Oh, okay.
guitar driven. So I relate to it like that. But yeah, that's an interesting fact to link the two together there with Beltram picking that one out because
So what happened to your mates then? They were just like, did you end up not falling out, but just sort of drifting apart, or was it just like
no. He kept sort of together because I was still interested in jazz and other sorts of stuff. And gradually mates have come round to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I remember talking to you about this. Aphex Twin was a breakthrough for one of my mates. You know, that's when the penny dropped for him.
Okay.
Didgeridoo, Analog Bubble Bath, that R&S collection, you know, like, wow, you know. And then for another mate, it was Model 500's The Passage, of all things. So, yeah, different mates came round to it at different times because it was permanent. It wasn't going away. It kept mutating, and it was a movement, you know, in some respects. But just that sense of the excitement of not knowing where anything come from, what was making it, how it was done, and all that sort of stuff. And in Hackney, there was a couple of record labels, so I come across Plus 8 at this time, From Our Minds to Yours, a Plus 8 compilation.
Yeah, I know, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, again, so I'd follow up Plus 8, you know, and things like that. Follow up Transmat, follow up, you know, Cole Craig stuff. I mean, I think he released one called Sound on Sound, those two great EPs that he did for R&S.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Cole Craig was a shared one amongst friends as well. I remember seeing Cole Craig, I think at Eurobeat 2000, DJing. That might have been one of the first sort of techno nights I went to. You know, once you found a mate to go with, you know what I mean? A close mate, you know. Sounds like Billy No Mate, but yeah, once someone was interested, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, well, no, it was one of, again, it was when that sort of scene really started crystallizing. I guess it was a bit like the early punk sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You got it and thought this was amazing. And then a lot of people just didn't understand it straight away. And they were like, no, what's this? I don't really understand. This isn't, you know. And then, but once you dived in, there was no going back.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that leads, you know, into the decade of the 90s for me, and meeting Christoph, Nomex, Jason Skeet and all that, which we can chat about at another time.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think we're finished there for this little chat, Howard. But yeah, next time let's dive a bit more into that.
Yeah, nice one, Neil. Yeah. I enjoyed it. Cheers, mate.
Cool.
Yeah.